Video games continue to become more and more standardized. There's a lot of things we see across a lot of different games, but some stuff really surprises us. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 things we can't believe developers thought of. And number 10 is shooting the bell in Resident Evil 4. Everybody remembers the big opening village shootout in Resident Evil 4. It was tough in the original, and in some ways it's actually a little tougher in the remake. In the original, you could mostly avoid having to deal with the chainsaw man that appears when you go into the house with a shotgun, but in the remake, he's gonna appear to torment you either way. Yeah, I know, the chainsaw guy appears either way in the original game, but there's no cutscene, and he's relatively easy to wait out. In both versions of the game, the sequence ends the same way, with the town bell ringing, which causes everyone to stop and shuffle themselves into the town hall building. So, if you just pull out a gun and shoot the bell, it'll ring, which will trigger the end of the fight. Turning one of the most difficult opening sequences in gaming into one of the easiest. Now all we need is the bell to ring during the open of Resident Evil Village, and then we'd be getting somewhere. And number 9 is Skyrim, stopping the assassin in Markarth. When you first enter the town of Markarth in Skyrim, you'll almost always see this scene where an assassin attacks and kills a woman, which kicks off the big quest line of the town. It all happens pretty quickly, but if you're going fast enough, it's actually possible to intervene and stop the killer before they're able to do anything. What's especially interesting about this, though, is that the game actually takes this into account, and you get some unique dialogue from the woman you saved. In so many games, they just make it so if someone's scripted to die, they die no matter what. But here, they actually put in a little effort to reward the more quick-witted players. Now, it doesn't, make a huge difference in the quest or anything, but all in all, it's a good detail for players who managed to kill the assassin before they were able to accomplish their mission. Like in a lot of games, you might go, I did it, I stopped this thing, and then get nothing, and the game just doesn't treat it like anything different has happened. But it's pretty badass this game actually takes into account your actual actions. And number 8, Hi-Fi Rush, winning a fight you're supposed to lose. Games love to throw in scripted events where you fight something that seems impossible, and to progress the game you actually have to lose. It's rare, but sometimes the game will actually let you win and acknowledge what you've done. Like, for instance, the opening boss of Devil May Cry 5, where it's clearly meant to be unbeatable, but if you somehow manage it, then the game gives you an ending and an attaboy for winning. You know, because the events of the game wouldn't happen if you won. Most games aren't so forgiving and just force you to lose no matter what, but Hi-Fi Rush actually does something pretty different. Near the start of the game, you run into an enemy that you're not supposed to be able to beat. You need Macaron with you to break them, but at that point, the game hasn't given you an opportunity to get him onto your team. So in New Game Plus, though, you can actually go back through the game with all of your unlocked allies, so that means this fight, totally beatable. The fun part is that the game actually comments on this. You get messages from Cinnamon accusing you of cheating, and
Mr. Jai, some macaron has yet to join you. This is cheating.
When the fight is over, they break the fourth wall and say they're gonna run the original cutscene anyway.
Well, this messes everything up.
Do not be afraid. I will activate the cutscene as usual.
Which is funny because in most games, they would just run the original cutscene because it would take effort to make different content to put there. And here, they put the effort into making more content to tell you they're going to run the original cutscene. And number 7 is High on Life, killing Dr. Jupy. So, in High on Life, you could mortally wound one of these bosses, Douglas, while he's masquerading as Dr. Jupy, before its intended boss battle. Dr. Jupy is completely defenseless, and if you do so, he'll be dead by the time you reach its arena. The problem is, he'll be replaced by another boss, which is Douglas's suit, working on autopilot after detecting the death of its owner. Completely identical gameplay-wise. Basically, Douglas is one of the bigger bounties, and Dr. Jupy is this character that you meet on the way to kill Douglas and turns out to be him. I don't know, it's not really that hard to tell that's what's going on here. The thing is, even though you have to fight the boss one way or the other, it kind of makes you feel clever, because if you kill Dr. Jupy, you kill Douglas. That means you saw through the lies, man. But thing is, as soon as you realize you can shoot him, which you can't do with other allies, you might not even think about it.
Did you say you're heading to find Douglas too?
Hey, come on,
His office
we're
is
not
that
gonna
big
shoot this little
building up
guy.
on top of
He's a
Great
cute
Town,
little
but
guy.
there's
Don't
a
let's
zip
not
line
scare
just
him.
past you.
But you can. There's a couple of really annoying pipe puzzles you can skip by doing this too, so it's actually worth doing even though it doesn't let you skip the boss fight. Now, I wouldn't put this one in the Metal Gear Solid 3 levels of deep file, but it's a fun little thing that the developers thought of that honestly I wouldn't have figured you could do. At number 6 is alternate boss phases in Cuphead. Cuphead already a game packed with these crazy little details, but I had no idea about these alternative ways to fight a few of the game's many big boss battles. Now, in my defense, all of these were added to the game later in a patch, but still, the attention to detail is absolutely mind-blowing. Probably the most appropriate alternate boss phase is when you fight the Root Pack. After you beat the potato, the second guy you have to fight is the Onion, who spends the entire fight crying, never directly attacking you. So just do what he does. It's instinct to just start shooting when a big target appears, but in this case, it's better to stop yourself. If you don't shoot the Onion at all, he'll appear, look around, and then disappear, which will trigger a new boss phase where you have to deal with this little radish guy. One of the strangest secret phases is against Sally's stage play. Normally, her phases involve different stages of life, so you start with her getting married, then house with a baby, then the afterlife, or something like that. It's odd. But to trigger the alternate phase, you jump up on top of these two cherubs that look like they're part of the scenery, and that causes the groom to get crushed by fallen stage equipment in the background. Now, instead of being a housewife, the second stage has Sally fight you outside a nunnery with little nuns throwing crosses at you. This even changes the final stage where the groom appears as a spirit and has the little cherubs attack you. There's more, but they're all like that in some way or another, and they don't necessarily make any of the fights easier. They're just fun to trigger and add a little more replayability to Cuphead's already insanely good boss fights. At number 5 is Shadow Tactics Blades of the Shogun, the sneezing powder trick. Basically a modern reimagining of games like Commandos and Desperados, Shadow Tactics is about as in-depth and hardcore as stealth games get. In it, you control an entire team of characters pulling off seemingly impossible jobs deep in enemy territory, and you know a game is tough when it reminds you to quick save after 30 seconds or so, because it's basically necessary to survive. It should come as no surprise that the final mission is a real beast in this game. It can easily take up to an hour or more. There's soldiers everywhere, and even the most minor progress takes a long time. It's a game that has to be approached slowly unless you use this one trick. At one point in the mission, the guy you're meant to assassinate will stop and inspect some soldiers on target practice. With some luck and timing, it's possible to use some sneezing powder on a soldier and make them fire their gun in the wrong direction, which just so happens to be the direction of your target. This one trick turns a mission that takes over an hour to complete into one you can finish in just minutes. It's amazing, and it's fantastic the devs actually made the whole thing possible. At number 4, an easy way to end the hostage situation in Dishonored. Now, these games are jam-packed with little details. Probably one of the most surprising, at least to me, is this one, though. During the final mission, you confront Admiral Havelock on top of the lighthouse on King Sparrow Island. Depending on whether you've got low chaos or high chaos, this mission plays out really differently. On high chaos, all the conspirators turn on each other, and when you confront Havelock, he's much more paranoid and takes the Princess Emily Caldwin hostage when you encounter him. Thing is, a lot of different things can happen here. You're not scripted to save Emily. She can die if you do the wrong thing, so most players probably do the most direct thing and shoot him in the head. That's not the only way you can resolve things, though. One of the more clever tricks is you can use the possession power on Havelock, which triggers a unique sequence where Emily recognizes that you're controlling her former captor and leaves on her own. Then you're free to just do whatever. If you actually have the possession power, it's a safe and easy way to resolve things so you can get the best possible ending. Not every plot critical character can be possessed, so being able to do it and having it acknowledged by the characters is an impressive detail for the developers to include. And number 3 is Enter the Matrix, losing to win. Most of the time when you're playing a video game, you want to win, right? That's obvious. When you die in a game, you got to start over, go back to the checkpoint, reload your save, whatever. Losing a fight is bad, especially when we're talking about a fight you're supposed to win. Enter the Matrix, a different kind of game though. I don't know if it's necessarily good, but as far as movie tie-in games go, it was at least ambitious, if nothing else. In the later part of the game, there's a part where you fight this guy named Seraph before you can talk with the Oracle. He's not exactly easy, but he's not super tough either, so it's likely most players will beat him on the first try. That's all well and good, but after you meet the Oracle, you have to deal with this huge chunk of levels where you have to run from Agent Smith. The levels can be a huge pain, but the whole thing's trial and error, and a case study in frustration that goes way longer than it needs to. So you've suffered through this whole thing once, why do it again? You can skip the entire Smith chase, and all you had to do was the counterintuitive thing of losing the fight with Sarah. That is all it takes. You lose to him and you skip straight to the next set of levels. It's one of these weird things games put in dev that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's welcome.
I am sorry, but the Oracle was mistaken. You cannot help us.
At number 2 is Splinter Cell Double Agent, Jamie's heart condition. The release of Splinter Cell Double Agent was super weird. There's actually 2 completely different versions of the same game, one for next-gen consoles like Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and another for Xbox and PS2 and GameCube. They aren't just slightly modified versions either, they're completely different. They have different levels, you do a lot of different things, just the basic premise of Sam Fisher becoming a double agent, that's the thing that is shared between these games. Personally, I think the superior version is actually the quote-unquote last-gen version. It was made by the Chaos Theory team, and while it's not as strong as Chaos Theory, there's some really good stuff in it. Like, there's one interesting little trick. One of the main terrorists you deal with in the game is Jamie Washington. He's the guy you break out of jail with at the start of the game. Early on, you find a note mentioning that Jamie actually has a pacemaker in his chest, which seems like an odd detail, but it has major ramifications later. Near the end of the game, you actually get to go ahead and take out Jamie. Normally pretty tricky to deal with, but if you remembered that note, the encounter becomes much easier. One of the main tools you get in Splinter Cell games is a pistol attachment called the OCP. It'll short out lights and electronics, and you don't have to shoot them, so you probably know where I'm going with this, right? You can use the OCP on Jamie, and it causes his pacemaker to stop, and that kills him. This isn't how you're supposed to do that part, and there's no other characters in the series who are affected by using the OCP on them. It's the only time it does anything to an actual human, which is a crazy little detail that's actually really awesome. And finally, at number 1, Cave Story, just saying no. You know how most old games give you the option between yes and no, and about 99% of the time saying no didn't mean anything? These games didn't really give you a choice. They say something like, but thou must, and just repeat themselves until you finally say yes. So it's like, why ask the question, man? Anyway, it's still actually pretty common nowadays. Yeah, they might fancy it up a little bit with dialogue, but at the end of the day, most of our choices don't really matter in games. That's what makes this so amusing in one of the original indie hits, Cave Story. Near the start of the game, you encounter this obvious mini-boss guy named Balrog who asks if you want to fight. You get the option to say yes and no, but the funny thing here is that if you say no, he's just like, okay, and then leaves. That's all it takes to get out of this boss fight. Just saying you don't want to do it, and he actually listens. That's probably the most respectful video game boss I've ever seen. Oh, you don't want to fight? Why would I fight you then? Video games would be so much easier if you could just choose to fight a boss or not. Yeah, sorry, I don't feel like it today. Then boom, victory music, roll credits. That's the end. With some games, if only we could be so lucky, right? And that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time, right here on Gameranx.